Ethan Wells adjusted his weathered leather jacket, taking a moment to glance at his reflection in the glass doors of Greenstone Bank's downtown branch. Gone was the sharp, tailored suit he typically donned as the CEO of one of America's most prominent banks. In its place were faded jeans and a simple plaid shirt. His usually immaculate haircut was deliberately tousled, and a week's worth of stubble adorned his jawline. The transformation was flawless. He looked nothing like the polished executive whose portrait graced the walls of the company's headquarters. Taking a steadying breath, he pushed open the heavy doors to branch number 103, nestled in the bustling heart of Chicago. The familiar gleam of marble floors and the sleek, modern decor, both products of his own approval during countless board meetings, now seemed alien, viewed from this unfamiliar perspective. Instead of bypassing the lobby and heading straight to the executive floor, he stepped into line with the other customers, blending seamlessly into the crowd. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, it was a calculated move. For the past 3 months, customer satisfaction ratings had taken a nosedive, while complaints rolled in like storm clouds on a radar. The boardroom pressure was suffocating, with directors demanding swift action. Yet Ethan had a gut feeling the issue wasn't just in the numbers or the reports his team provided. If he wanted to truly understand why trust in Greenstone Bank was unraveling, he had to experience the customer's journey firsthand. As he waited, his sharp eyes scanned the room. Most customers bore expressions of exhaustion and quiet frustration, not the hopeful, assured faces he had envisioned when reimagining the bank's customer service. His attention was drawn to a heated exchange nearby, unfolding between two individuals. A middle-aged man, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, was speaking in a voice tight with suppressed anger. "This is absolutely ridiculous," he said, his frustration palpable. 20 years I've been banking here. Perfect credit score, never missed a payment, and my business is thriving. Yet they reject my loan application, without so much as a decent explanation." Next to him, an elderly woman clutched a well-worn leather handbag, her frail hands trembling slightly. She nodded in sympathy, her voice soft but heavy with sorrow. "I understand completely, dear," she said, her eyes clouded with worry. "I came in because my life savings, everything I put away for my granddaughter's college fund, it's just vanished overnight. No one will tell me how or why." Ethan's chest tightened as he listened. He had always known that loan rejections and occasional account issues were part of banking life, but they were supposed to come with clear, fair explanations. What he was hearing now painted a far more troubling picture, one that felt deeply personal and disturbingly systemic. Ethan Wells felt his stomach churn as the elderly woman's words hit him like a punch. Gone. Vanished overnight. And no one here will give me a straight answer about what happened. As CEO of Greenstone Bank, Ethan knew that occasional loan rejections or account discrepancies were part of the business, but those cases always came with clear explanations and proper documentation. This was different. Something about this woman's trembling voice and the frustration in the air felt deeply wrong. Ethan shifted closer to the conversation, pretending to study a mortgage rate pamphlet while eavesdropping. "My sister had the same issue last month," the man in the business suit muttered, lowering his voice. "She owns a thriving restaurant downtown, perfect candidate for a business expansion loan. But the bank kept stalling, sending her in circles until—" he paused, his eyes darting around nervously before finishing, "until someone suggested she make an unofficial payment to get it approved." The elderly woman's eyes widened in shock. "You mean a bribe? In this bank?" Just then a teller called her name. "Mrs. Reynolds?" The woman stood, her worn leather handbag clutched tightly in her hands. The man offered her a business card before she walked away. "I'm James Cooper. If you need help fighting this, give me a call. Maybe if enough of us speak out." Ethan watched Mrs. Reynolds shuffle to the counter, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her missing savings. The young teller barely looked up as the elderly woman pleaded for help. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the teller recited, her tone mechanical, "but all transactions on your account appear properly authorized. You can file another formal complaint if you wish." "Another complaint?" Mrs. Reynolds's voice cracked, tears pooling in her eyes. "I've already filed 3. My husband worked 2 jobs for 40 years to save for our granddaughter's future. And now it's just gone. Please, there must be someone who can help." Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling his attention momentarily. A notification from the bank's app flashed across the screen. "We regret to inform you that your loan application has been denied." Ethan stared at the message, his heart pounding. His undercover persona had impeccable credentials, a perfect credit score, a stable income, and no debts. There was absolutely no reason for the rejection. The pieces began to fall into place. James Cooper's denied loan, Mrs. Reynolds's vanished savings, the bribe suggestion for the restaurant owner, and now his own inexplicable rejection. This wasn't just bad customer service or isolated incidents. It was a pattern. A commotion at the front desk broke his thoughts. Mrs. Reynolds, usually soft-spoken from what Ethan had observed, was now raising her voice. "I demand to see the branch manager. You can't just make people's money disappear and hide behind procedures." Two security guards approached, their faces stern. Ethan watched in horror as they began escorting her toward the exit, her desperate pleas drawing the attention of other customers. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking, "my granddaughter's future depends on that money. I just want answers." The doors closed behind her, and the bank returned to its routine as if nothing had happened. But Ethan couldn't shake the image of her distraught face, or forget James Cooper's words about corruption. Taking a deep breath, Ethan made his decision. He strode to the front desk, ready to face the same obstacles his customers did. "Excuse me," he said, locking eyes with the teller who had dismissed Mrs. Reynolds. "I'd like to discuss my loan application denial. And I'm not leaving until I get some real answers." Moments later, Ethan sat across from Sarah Fleming, the loan officer. The small, windowless office felt oppressively cramped, with walls covered in generic posters about financial success. Sarah nervously shuffled his documents, her fingers tapping anxiously on the keyboard. "Mr. Lee," she began, addressing him by his undercover name, "our algorithm's decision is very thorough." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his sharp gaze catching a small sticky note on her desk. Scrawled on it was a phone number and the cryptic message, "Call for special approvals." When Sarah noticed him glancing at it, she quickly crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash. "Could you explain exactly which criteria I failed to meet?" Ethan pressed, pulling out proof of his income and assets. Before Sarah could respond, Ethan's phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced down discreetly and froze. The headline read, "Local business owner ruined after loan denial from Greenstone Bank." The article detailed the story of Derek Zhang, a successful restaurant owner whose critical business loan had been inexplicably denied. The case was now under investigation. Sarah's voice brought Ethan back to the present. "Mr. Lee, sometimes the system identifies risk factors that aren't immediately obvious." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "However, there are alternative channels for loan approval. If you're interested, I could connect you with someone who handles special cases." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. "How much do these alternative channels cost?" "That depends on the loan amount," Sarah replied, leaning in slightly. "For your requested $50,000, the processing fee would be $5,000. Cash only, of course." Just then, the door burst open and a young woman stormed in, her face streaked with tears. "Miss Fleming, please? I need to talk to you about my mother's account." "Miss Chin," Sarah said coldly, "I'm with a client. As I've explained, your mother's transactions were properly authenticated." "She has dementia," the woman cried, her voice breaking. "She couldn't have authorized those transfers, and now the nursing home is threatening to evict her because the payments bounced." Sarah pressed a button under her desk, and within moments 2 security guards entered to escort the woman out. Ethan watched in silence, his anger simmering as Sarah turned back to him with a forced smile. "My apologies for the interruption," she said. "Now, about those alternative channels?" Ethan stood, his decision made. "I'll think about it," he said, his mind racing. As he reached the door, he turned back casually. "By the way, who handles these special approvals?" Sarah hesitated before writing down a name and number. "Mel Wong, Senior Coordinator." Ethan recognized the name. Wong had been promoted just 6 months earlier, despite other more qualified candidates. Leaving the bank, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed his most trusted internal auditor. "Janet," he said, his voice low. "I need you to run a full audit on every loan rejection over the past 6 months. Focus on applicants with high credit scores. And check for any unusual account activity, especially elderly customers or those with cognitive impairments." "Yes, sir," Janet replied. "What exactly am I looking for?" "Anything that doesn't add up," Ethan said grimly. "And Janet, keep this between us. Don't trust anyone else." As he walked to his car, Ethan noticed a black sedan with tinted windows parked across the street. When he drove away, the sedan followed. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You're asking dangerous questions. Derek Zhang asked too many too. Back off while you can." Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. This was no longer just about bad customer service or corruption. Something much darker was unfolding at Greenstone Bank, and he was determined to uncover the truth. Ethan Wells started his car, his mind racing as he connected the dots. Mrs. Reynolds's missing savings, Miss Chen's mother's drained account, James Cooper's loan denial, Derek Zhang's mysterious death, Michael Wong's suspicious promotion, and now, threats against his undercover identity. As he drove home, keeping a careful eye on the black sedan he suspected was following him, his phone buzzed again. A message from Janet: "Sir, I found something big, really big, but I can't send it electronically. We need to meet in person tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. at the Coffee Bean 2 blocks from my house." Ethan replied immediately, "I'll be there." But as he pulled into his garage, another message popped up on his screen. "We know who you really are, Mr. Wells. The question is, do your shareholders know what's really happening to their money?" Ethan sat in his dark car, realizing that his simple undercover mission had uncovered something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Tomorrow's meeting with Janet could be the key to exposing everything, if he survived long enough to get there. The next morning at exactly 7 a.m., the Coffee Bean was nearly empty, save for a few early risers. Ethan sat in a corner booth, his hands wrapped tightly around a cup of black coffee, his eyes fixed on the door. Janet was 10 minutes late, unusual for someone known for her punctuality. His phone rang, the caller ID showing an unknown number. "Mr. Wells?" Janet's voice was barely a whisper. "Don't go to the coffee shop. They're watching it. Meet me at St. Mary's Hospital, 5th floor, waiting room. Come alone." The line went dead. Something was wrong. Janet sounded terrified. Ethan left a few bills on the table and walked out, taking a circuitous route to the hospital and switching taxis twice to ensure he wasn't being followed. On the 5th floor of the oncology ward, he found Janet sitting alone in the waiting room, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her usually impeccable appearance disheveled. "Someone broke into my apartment last night," Janet said abruptly, her hands trembling as she handed him a USB drive. "They took my laptop, but they didn't find this. I hid it in my grandmother's old jewelry box." "What's on it?" Ethan asked. "Evidence of a massive fraud network," Janet replied, her voice shaky. "The loan denials and drained accounts, they're just the surface. The real scheme is much bigger." She pulled out a notepad filled with numbers. "Look at these transactions. Every time a legitimate loan is denied, a much riskier loan for the same amount is approved within days. The money is funneled into shell companies, all linked to a single offshore account. And then?" Ethan pressed, his eyes narrowing. "That account regularly pays 4 of our senior executives," Janet explained. "Michael Wong is just the smallest player. The real masterminds are much higher up." Her voice trailed off as her phone buzzed. Her face turned pale as she read the message. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Janet handed him her phone. Attached was a photo of her teenage daughter leaving school, along with the message, "Beautiful girl. Shame if something happened to her." "Go now," Ethan said firmly. "Get your daughter and take her somewhere safe. I'll handle this." "But there's more you need to know," Janet insisted, her voice urgent. "The pattern changed 3 months ago. The amounts got bigger and they started targeting specific accounts. Military personnel, government employees, anyone with access to sensitive information. This isn't just about money anymore." Just then a nurse approached. "Miss Joe, your mother's test results are ready." Janet looked confused. "I don't have a..." Ethan grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the elevator. He noticed the nurse reaching into her pocket, catching a glint of metal. They ran down the emergency stairwell, the sound of footsteps echoing behind them. In the parking garage, Ethan led Janet to an exit he had spotted earlier. "My car's being washed," Janet gasped as they ran. "Take mine," Ethan said, tossing her his keys. "There's a cabin in Mount Ridge registered under my grandmother's name. The address is in the GPS. Go there and wait for my call." After Janet drove off, Ethan found a quiet corner to examine the USB drive. He needed a safe place to review its contents, but his office had been compromised, and his home was likely being watched. Then he remembered the old server room in the bank's basement, abandoned during a system upgrade last year. The basement was eerily quiet, the hum of machinery filling the air. Using his executive keycard, Ethan unlocked the server room, where the outdated terminal still functioned. Plugging in the USB, he discovered thousands of files, transaction logs, email chains, and surveillance photos. One folder stood out, Project Phoenix. Inside were documents that left Ethan stunned. The loan scheme wasn't just fraud, it was part of a sophisticated operation targeting individuals with access to classified information. Financial pressure was being used to coerce them into compliance. And Greenstone Bank wasn't the only institution involved. There were several others. Ethan pored over the spreadsheets, which listed assets like military base access codes, diplomatic communications, and security protocols. This wasn't just a criminal enterprise, it was espionage. He was so absorbed in the files that he almost missed the sound of footsteps. Quickly, he pocketed the USB drive and hid behind a server rack. Two figures entered the room. In the dim light, Ethan recognized Michael Wong and another familiar voice, Thomas Bradford, his chief of security. "The CEO is getting too close," Bradford said. "He needs to be dealt with." "What about the auditor?" Wong asked. "She'll be handled," Bradford replied. "But Wells is the real problem. The committee wants him eliminated before he exposes the operation. A CEO's death will draw attention," Wong cautioned. "Not if it looks like he did it himself," Bradford said with a chilling tone. "The stress of running a failing bank, the shame of hidden corruption. It's quite believable." Ethan held his breath as they walked past his hiding spot. Once they left, he waited several minutes before moving. His mind raced. The committee. Multiple banks. International espionage. How deep did this conspiracy go? He pulled out his phone to warn Janet but stopped. If Bradford was involved, all communications could be compromised. He needed concrete proof to expose everything. Then he remembered something from the files. A meeting scheduled for tonight at an abandoned warehouse. The committee's local representatives would all be there. Ethan Wells checked his watch. 6 hours. That's all he had to prepare. 6 hours to gather enough evidence to bring down not just the corrupt elements in his bank but an entire international espionage operation. Unless, of course, they got to him first. He knew he couldn't take on such a powerful network alone. His head of security, Thomas Bradford, was compromised. His board might be infiltrated. Even his executive team couldn't be trusted. He needed allies, people completely disconnected from Greenstone Bank's hierarchy. His mind turned to James Cooper, the businessman whose loan application had been unjustly denied. A quick search brought him to Cooper's small accounting firm downtown. Walking in without an appointment, Ethan found him poring over financial records. "Mr. Cooper," Ethan said as he closed the office door behind him, "I think we share a common goal, exposing what's happening at Greenstone Bank." Cooper looked up, suspicious. "Who are you?" "I'm someone who knows your loan denial wasn't random," Ethan replied. "I also know about the bribe they suggested your sister pay for her restaurant loan." He paused. "And I know about your past work with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit." Cooper's expression hardened. "You've done your homework. But you still haven't told me who you are." "I'm Ethan Wells, CEO of Greenstone Bank," he said, locking eyes with Cooper. "And I need your help to expose a conspiracy far bigger than simple fraud." For the next hour, Ethan shared everything he had uncovered. Cooper listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. "This matches patterns I've seen before," Cooper said finally. 10 years ago, I investigated similar operations in Asia. Banks would be infiltrated and used to gather intelligence through financial pressure. But we could never trace it back to the masterminds. "Well, now we have proof," Ethan said, showing him the USB drive. "There's a meeting tonight at a warehouse. All the key players will be there." Cooper shook his head. "It's a trap. They know you have this information. They'll be expecting you." "That's what I'm counting on," Ethan said grimly. "But they won't expect what I have planned." The next few hours were a flurry of preparation. Cooper contacted trusted former FBI colleagues now working in private security. Ethan used his CEO access to gather more evidence, carefully avoiding detection by using backdoors in the bank's outdated systems. But they needed one more person, someone who could unravel the technical side of the operation. Ethan thought of Kevin Zhang, the son of Derek Zhang, the restaurant owner whose life was ruined by the bank's schemes. A brilliant cybersecurity expert, Kevin had been independently investigating his father's downfall. They found Kevin in the empty restaurant, surrounded by laptops and monitors. After hearing their story, he agreed to help, his eyes burning with determination. Kevin's analysis of the USB drive revealed a crucial detail. "This warehouse meeting isn't just a gathering," he explained, pointing to decrypted communications. "They're planning to transfer all the stolen intelligence to their overseas handlers tonight. Once that happens, the evidence will be gone." As night fell, the plan was set. Kevin would handle the technical side, disrupting communications and securing digital evidence. Cooper's security team would surround the warehouse, ensuring no one could escape. "And Ethan? I'll walk right through the front door," he said. "This is insane," Cooper said, shaking his head. You're painting a target on your back. They want me gone anyway, Ethan replied. Might as well make it count. At 9 p.m. Ethan parked outside the warehouse. Through his earpiece he heard Kevin confirm, surveillance cameras are looped. Cooper's team is in position. Movement inside, Kevin added. 12 heat signatures. Main room, second floor. Ethan adjusted his hidden camera and microphone. Whatever happens, he said, make sure the evidence gets out. This goes far beyond me. He walked to the entrance, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. A guard stopped him. I believe they're expecting me, Ethan said, flashing his CO badge. The guard made a call then nodded. Ethan climbed the stairs, Kevin's voice crackling in his ear. Signal interference starting. They're beginning the data transfer. The second floor was dimly lit. Around a large table sat familiar faces, Michael Wong, Thomas Bradford, and 3 members of Greenstone Bank's board. At the head of the table was someone who made Ethan's heart freeze, his brother Richard Wells. Hello, little brother, Richard said calmly. We've been waiting for you. Ethan fought to keep his composure. His brother had been presumed dead in a boating accident 10 years ago. Yet here he was, apparently leading the very operation Ethan was trying to expose. Why, was all Ethan could ask. Because someone has to ensure America's enemies can't use its financial system against it, Richard replied. Everything we've done, the intelligence gathering, the pressure campaigns, it's all to protect our country. By stealing from innocent people? Ethan retorted. By silencing those who discover your schemes? Acceptable losses for the greater good, Richard said, standing. Join us, Ethan. We could use someone with your public credibility. Before Ethan could respond, Kevin's voice broke through his earpiece. Data transfer at 60%. Something's wrong, they're tracking our interference. Suddenly, alarms blared. Guards burst into the room, guns drawn. Through his earpiece, Ethan heard sounds of struggle. Your friends outside? Richard said, smirking. Did you really think we wouldn't be prepared? But Ethan smiled back. Actually, I was counting on it. At that moment, the lights went out. In the darkness, Kevin's triumphant voice came through. FBI Cyber Division in the system. All data secured. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the warehouse was swarming with FBI agents. James Cooper stepped into the room, now wearing an FBI tactical vest. Richard Wells, you're under arrest for espionage and fraud, Cooper said. As Richard was handcuffed, Ethan saw the look of betrayal in his brother's eyes. You don't understand what you've done, Richard spat. We were the last line of defense. Ethan Wells carefully made his way down the maintenance shaft, emerging in the underground parking garage of Greenstone Bank's headquarters. His car was likely being watched, but tucked in the corner was an old maintenance van he remembered spotting during his undercover visits. Wasting no time, Ethan hotwired it, a rebellious skill from his college days that now proved invaluable. As the van roared to life, his phone buzzed with a message from the mysterious caller. Davidson isn't just meeting the board, they're activating something called Protocol Zero. Whatever you do, don't let that meeting finish. Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he sped out of the garage, thoughts racing. Richard had tried to stop this shadow organization and failed. Now, it was up to Ethan to finish what his brother had started, not just to expose a banking conspiracy but to dismantle a covert network manipulating global finance. The Sterling Hotel loomed ahead, its gleaming towers reflecting the midday sun. Somewhere inside, Samuel Davidson, his former mentor, was about to set something catastrophic in motion. Ethan was the only one who could stop it, unless, of course, it was all a trap. His phone buzzed one last time. Choose wisely, Mr. Wells. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Ethan parked the van and stared up at the hotel. The truth about his brother, his mentor, and the entire financial system lay somewhere inside. The only question was whether he'd live long enough to expose it. He entered the hotel through a service entrance, wearing the maintenance uniform he had found in the van. The grand ballroom was being prepared for what appeared to be a financial conference, a perfect cover for a clandestine meeting. Near the lobby, Ethan spotted Janet, disguised as a hotel guest. She gave him a subtle nod, then fed him information through a hidden earpiece. Top floor, presidential suite, she whispered. Davidson just arrived with 6 others. They're carrying briefcases with quantum encryption locks. Ethan's heart pounded as he rode the service elevator to the top floor. The pieces were falling into place. The Global Financial Security Initiative wasn't just controlling markets, they were rewriting the rules of global power. As he approached the suite, familiar voices filtered through the door. Protocol Zero must be activated today, Davidson said. With the new AI-driven financial algorithm, we can control every major market, every currency, every economic decision. No more unpredictable human elements. And what about Wells? Another voice asked. Once Protocol Zero is active, he won't matter. No one will. Ethan had heard enough. He pulled out his phone and pressed send on a pre-recorded message. Suddenly, every screen in the hotel, from the lobby monitors to the TVs in the suites, began playing a damning compilation of evidence. Davidson's secret meetings, market manipulations, and illegal schemes orchestrated by the initiative. The suite door burst open as security guards rushed out to investigate the commotion. Ethan slipped inside, finding Davidson alone, typing furiously on a quantum-encrypted laptop. It's over, Samuel, Ethan said. Davidson didn't even flinch. You still don't understand, he sneered. We created order from chaos. We prevented wars through economic control. We made the world stable. By stealing from innocent people? Ethan shot back. By destroying lives? Sacrifices for the greater good, Davidson said coldly, his fingers still flying across the keyboard. Protocol Zero will autonomously control all financial systems. No human weakness, no corruption. No freedom either, Ethan countered. Suddenly, Janet's voice crackled over the hotel speakers. Quantum encryption breached. Protocol Zero code exposed. Davidson's face twisted with rage. Impossible. That encryption was created by my father. Before he could finish, Kevin Zhang's voice cut in through Ethan's earpiece. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my father's work? Janet continued, every major financial regulator in the world is receiving Protocol Zero's code right now. They're seeing how it was designed to manipulate markets, steal from ordinary citizens, and concentrate power in the initiative's hands. Davidson lunged for his phone, but Ethan was faster. Looking for this? He said, holding up the device. Your colleagues are already being arrested worldwide. The initiative is finished. You fool, Davidson snarled. Without us, the system will collapse. No, Ethan replied calmly. Something better will take its place. The room flooded with FBI agents, led by James Cooper. Samuel Davidson, Cooper announced, you're under arrest for espionage and fraud. As Davidson was handcuffed, Ethan saw the look of betrayal in his former mentor's eyes. You don't know what you've done, Davidson spat. We were the last line of defense. No, Ethan said quietly. You were just another threat that needed to be stopped. The raid had succeeded. The conspiracy was exposed and the evidence was secured. Yet as Ethan watched Davidson being led away, he felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for what fear and misguided ambition had created. His phone rang, the caller's voice now clear and unaltered. Congratulations, the voice said. You passed the test. We're a watchdog organization, the caller explained. We identify and expose corruption in global finance. Richard worked for us, trying to expose the initiative from the inside. When he was compromised, we needed someone else to finish the job. And now? Ethan asked warily. Now you have a choice. Help us rebuild the system, make it transparent and fair. Your bank can lead the way. 3 months later, Ethan stood in the transformed lobby of Greenstone Bank. Digital displays showed real-time transaction monitoring, making every major financial operation transparent to customers. Mrs. Reynolds had recovered her lost savings, and James Cooper now led the bank's new customer protection division. Janet approached Ethan, holding a tablet. The new blockchain-based verification system is live, she said. Every transaction is traceable and secure. And the ethical AI system? Ethan asked. Protecting customers from fraud better than ever, Kevin Zhang chimed in. Ethan looked at the bank's new mission statement etched on the wall. Financial trust through transparent truth. Below it, screens displayed live market data, proof that ethical banking and profitability could coexist. As his phone buzzed with a message from the watchdog organization, Ethan smiled. Ready to tackle the next big challenge? Send me the details, he replied. There's still work to be done. Digital displays throughout the bank now showed real-time transaction monitoring, making every major operation transparent to customers. Mrs. Reynolds, who had once stood desperate and hopeless at the teller's counter, had finally been reunited with her savings. Thank you, Mr. Wells, she said with a warm smile as she approached Ethan. Not just for my savings but for everything you've done. Ethan watched as customers moved confidently through the bank, no longer burdened by fear or frustration. Trust was being rebuilt, one transaction at a time. Janet, now the chief transparency officer, walked up holding a sleek tablet. The new blockchain-based verification system is live, she reported. Every transaction is now traceable and secure. Kevin Zhang, leading the cybersecurity division, added, and the ethical AI system is running better than ever, detecting and preventing fraud more effectively than anything we've seen before. Ethan nodded, his gaze shifting to the bank's new mission statement mounted on the wall: financial trust through transparent truth. Below it, a series of large screens displayed live market data, a visual testament that ethical banking could thrive alongside profitability. His phone buzzed with a message from the watchdog organization: ready to help us tackle the next big challenge? Ethan smiled, thinking about how far they had come. The banking world was evolving, becoming what it should have always been: a service for people, not a tool for exploitation. Send me the details, he replied. There's still work to be done. Walking through the bank, Ethan greeted employees and customers alike, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. They hadn't just exposed corruption, they had built a blueprint for meaningful change. Other banks were already adopting similar transparency measures and ethical AI systems. Richard had been right about one thing: finance needed protection. But not from foreign threats. It needed protection from those who sought to abuse it. Now, finally, that protection was in place. The next morning, headlines declared, Greenstone Bank sets new standard in banking ethics, a revolution in financial transparency. Ethan clipped the article next to the last letter he had received from his brother in prison. You found a better way. I'm proud of you, little brother. The story that had begun with a simple loan denial and a missing fortune had grown into something far more impactful, a catalyst for real transformation in the financial world. As Ethan stood by his office window, overlooking the bustling city below, he knew one truth. While there would always be those who sought to corrupt the system, there would also always be people willing to fight for what's right. And sometimes that made all the difference. But the story doesn't end here. As Greenstone Bank gradually became a symbol of financial transparency, an anonymous message suddenly appeared on Ethan's phone. Don't get too complacent. The biggest truth has yet to be revealed. A new series of secret transactions emerged within the system, accompanied by signs of a conspiracy far more sophisticated than the global financial initiative. Familiar names, and some completely unexpected ones, were suddenly caught in the whirlwind of power. Looking up at the inscription on the wall, financial trust through transparent truth, Ethan couldn't shake the question from his mind. Is someone trying to hide an even more terrifying secret? And most importantly, could there be a traitor within his own team? The truth will be uncovered. But at what cost? Stay tuned for part 2 to uncover hidden secrets. Because the battle for transparency has only just begun.